Today on Cyberwork, Sam Chehab of Postman is going to talk to us about API security and the concept of rogue AI agents. The concept of the rogue AI agent is multifaceted. It can include internal company policy.
I'm not talking Skynet where agents build agents or anything along those lines, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the first lens with which we have to look at. It's your well-intentioned developer trying to solve a problem or business user, and how do we get them to do the right thing?
But on the more extreme side, of course, it can also be used to talk about hackers using AI to create stronger, harder to detect malware.
The bad guys are often using AI to come after us. And
Yep.
that's, I think, what a lot of people latch onto because it sounds really sexy.
But mostly we're talking about AI's role in creating improved API security, as well as the way that this task will require buy-in from different parts of the development and security team.
If you had to go talk to any developer off the street, like that would be one of their headaches, at which point they would try to displace that back into the security team. They'd be like, hey, that's your job, security team. How do we get those roles and those problems to converge?
And Sam discusses some ways that he thinks that the development and security job roles will change, expand, contract, and become more democratized in the years to come.
Your product managers are now able to build a prototype to hand back into engineering to go see how it really functions and get better visibility into that. As the floor lowers, I just see the work shifting. Software engineers will need to solve harder and harder complex problems.
That's all today. The IT and cybersecurity job market is thriving. Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts 377,500 new IT jobs annually. You need skill and hustle to obtain these jobs, of course, but the good news is that cybersecurity professionals can look forward to extremely competitive salaries. That's why Infosec has leveraged 20 years of industry experience, drawing from multiple sources to give you, Cyberwork listeners, an analysis of the most popular and top-paying industry certifications. You can use it to navigate your way to a good-paying cybersecurity career. So to get your free copy of our Cybersecurity Salary Guide ebook, just click the link in the description below. It's right there near the top, just below me. You can't miss it. Click the link in the description and download our free Cybersecurity Salary Guide ebook. Your cybersecurity journey starts here. Now, let's get the show started. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cyberwork Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Senko. My guests are a cross-section of cybersecurity industry thought leaders, and our goal is to help you learn about cybersecurity trends and how those trends affect the work of Infosec professionals, as well as leave you with some tips and advice for breaking in or moving up the ladder in the cybersecurity industry. My guest today, Sam Chehab, is the head of security and IT at Postman, bringing over 20 years of experience in enterprise engineering, application management, and cybersecurity. Prior to Postman, he also served as Senior Director of Enterprise and Data Security at Palo Alto Networks, where he led company-wide initiatives in Zero Trust, risk management, and customer trust. He also held leadership roles at Nvidia, overseeing IT engineering efforts to address core security challenges, such as automated asset management and defect tracking. Sam holds an executive MBA from the University of San Francisco. So when we first started talking, Sam was telling me about something called rogue AI agents and their role in creating malware, as well as fighting AI-enhanced cyber threats. So we're going to see AI is going to be both the possibly the good guy and the bad guy in this scenario, and I'm looking forward to finding out more. So Sam, thanks for joining me today, and welcome to Cyberwork.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I love the opportunity to always talk shop with folks.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you here. So, Sam, let's start with a bit about you and your original interest in tech and security. Have you been an early tech adopter and tech fan your whole life? What was the initial sort of spark to get into cybersecurity and tech?
I guess going way back, this reminds me of when I was just a little kid. My dad would bring this compact laptop home. It was the size of a briefcase, and I think it had like a 10 megabyte hard disk or something. And he'd toss that on the table and say, I've loaded a game on it. If you can find it, you can play games until dinner. And so like that very early inception, I was kind of indoctrinated into tech because it just fascinated me. And obviously it's progressed through DOS and then later into BASIC and then off to web pages. And eventually, like most kids, probably cheated on tests with my TI-85 calculator and played Centipede. And then it eventually moved into, this is long before great services like Hack the Box, but just writing scripts to use file exchange protocol or FXP to distribute software globally across the internet. So I've had lots of fun in lots of spaces in the tech world. And needless to say, I didn't follow in the footsteps of my father. I dumped civil engineering pretty fast and pivoted into
Okay.
tech.
So I'm curious about the original spark there. He said if you can find the game in the computer, was that his way of sort of teaching you to understand sort of like file access or just like the sort of nuts and bolts of how to make the computer work? Is that right?
Yeah, just here's the manual, go learn DOS and then go find your game to play. And it was just,
Amazing.
as a kid, just finding a way to gamify something and get you engaged was very powerful for me.
That is so smart. I love that. Yeah, thank you. That's one of the better stories I've heard here, I think, actually. So, yeah, and certainly the names like TI-99 calculators and stuff, we've heard them before. Let's just say we're all of a certain age and era here. That yeah, those were some of the foundational machines for us. So Sam, your career started basically. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I like to look at people's backgrounds to get sort of an X-ray of their career. But you started firmly in a software engineering and app development space with companies like Nvidia and Box 2 Technologies before taking on more security-focused work in data security with Palo Alto and Postman. So, was this a big change in your work to that point? And if so, what got you interested in moving into data security? And what did you have to do to sort of get up to speed in that area?
Yeah, so I think I did probably what every classic developer did. I screwed up just about everything that OWASP Top 10 warned you about. I made that mistake.
Okay.
And
Yep.
um, back then, the way that security typically engaged with engineering is they printed out a PDF and said, here's why you're terrible at your job and go do better." And I
Yeah.
just kept thinking to myself, there's just gotta be a better way. And um, obviously the tools have gotten better. Security has really started to pivot into how do we engage the business, but just it really fascinated because security is such an interesting spectrum between having a high degree of technical mastery and at the same time having business acumen. And that
Yeah.
intersection was just fascinating for me and really what kind of drove my pivot from software engineering to the how can I just do this better to be compliant and not have the security guy chase me, but how can security come to the table and say, if you just follow this pattern or just use my secure base image, then you don't have some of these problems. And so that was really kind of the precipice for me to pivot out of a classic engineering role and pivot into cybersecurity.
Can you speak more on? I agree with you totally with regards to the intersection between cyber safety and business acumen. But for our listeners, can you talk more about that aspect of cybersecurity, the business acumen part of it?
So I guess the analogy I often use when I first start chatting with someone is I wouldn't spend $1 million in a security system to protect my shovel inside of a shed. I'm over securing it. And
Yep.
if you extrapolate that analogy out back into the real world, it turns into, well, if using a secrets manager isn't super painful and you unlock it with Touch ID, well, that's a great way to protect your secrets. We don't need to go any further. And it's almost no friction on you as a user. And so that's kind of the path that we look for is how do we get the implementation to be frictionless for you as the consumer or just enough friction, but not enough for you to do it a different way that's a lot would be considered wrong or more prone to risk. And that's kind of the business acumen side of it in my mind of doing risk reduction, but not in a way where it feels overburdensome when you're filling out TPS reports, if I have to kind of follow the office space analogy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, I feel like those particular aspects of cybersecurity have maybe separated out a little more. Now you have sort of like the cybersecurity people who are entirely working on the sort of risk side, and then the ones who are maybe doing the implementation. Is would you say that that's more the case now, or is it still? Do you still have to be kind of fluid in all these different places?
Um, if you're running a really strong security program, you can blur the line between a control says this and your implementation looks like this. And I think uh, shops are on some end of that spectrum between being very dogmatic, the control says this, and the security individual saying, "Well, I know this technology, and here's how I'm going to do it." I think there's a spectrum there, but if security looks at itself like most back office functions, it has to figure out how to scale.
Mm.
And I think AI has been a real game changer for us in that respect, in that how do I give you guidance up front to make better decisions so that I don't need to be everywhere? And an example I'd pick on there would be um, probably on the farthest end for most security programs, it'd be like third-party risk management. Well, I send you a questionnaire and you send me a questionnaire, and I have my AI fill out your questionnaire and you have your AI fill out my questionnaire. And like no one really ever reads anyone's report at the end of the day. But um, if I take third-party risk management and I tie it to the procurement process, well, let's say Chris wants to go buy something. And I say, hey, Chris, I'm going to take my expertise as a third-party risk management specialist. I'm
Hmm.
going to give an AI model the prescriptive prompt to talk about competitors, how to evaluate the software package, and you give me the software package, then I can give you, as an end consumer, a lot of prescriptive guidance of what is the spirit of an RFP process, but I can use AI to drive it back into your space. And you can start to translate kind of my need for, well, what does a vendor's security scorecard look like publicly? Well, if
Hmm.
that vendor doesn't look very secure, I can process that and I can stack rank who I recommend you to go take a look at that are competitors in the space. And so that's a bridge between kind of the old way of doing it and kind of the new way of doing it, and how I
Hmm.
see that intersection
Yeah.
manifesting itself.
Yeah. I feel like this has been the ultimate ambition of creating AI in the first place, is to take out, because a lot of that would otherwise just be the drudge work of you going on the internet and just looking up numbers and adding numbers to a spreadsheet and adding this and adding that. That's not the part that you should be wanting to do. That just takes up time. Whereas you can, once you have all those numbers in front of you, then you use your non AI brain to sort of evaluate all this raw data that's come at you in organized form like that. Is that right?
Yeah, but the business side of it is if I create friction on your end as a user,
Hmm.
well, you just swipe a credit card and go do your own thing until you get caught, at which point we have a risk problem. So I think it's how do we, to borrow the analogy that we used earlier with regards to development and my own path, how do we meet you where you are to go solve the problem that you've got with or with AI, without AI? That's
Hmm.
kind of the spirit of it, and what I see kind of unfolding
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so we're going to be getting to the AI agents in a moment, but I want to jump back to your career a little bit, if you don't mind. So one of the projects in your previous work was defining and leading a zero trust strategy deployment for Palo Alto. Can you talk about what that experience was like? Like what the challenges were, what you learned from the experience? Because we hear a lot of especially with the government, there's zero trust by X date and things like that, and it's always these sort of ticking clocks and so forth. But what was developing a zero trust strategy for Palo Alto like?
I think developing a zero trust strategy at a security company was very interesting because security companies obviously have their own predefinition of what zero trust was. There's a lot of great articles out there from other thought leaders, a lot of vendors. NIST 800-207 talks about zero trust at a very kind of academic but principled way. DoD has their own cut at it. Um, what I struggled with was how do we get all of the subject matter experts within their respective domain on the same page? And I think that's what is why industry has kind of taken this term zero trust and kind of morphed it into kind of their own definition. But really, it all distills down into kind of the same format. Make sure that you secure all of your identities, whether this be a contractor account. Do they use MFA as an example? Make sure that you're hardening all your devices. And my definition of hardened may be the center of internet security level 2. For you, it may be a system technical implementation guide because you're working in the DoD space. But some definition of hardening that device, hardening your applications. So, for example, have you walked all of your SaaS applications and ensured that they all log to your SIM? Make sure that you do responsible access management for third-party plugins, things of that nature. Then you kind of go to that next tier, that next pillar, if you will. And it's really Now that I've hardened my identities, hardened my devices, hardened my applications, enforce least privilege. And you can easily in English language go just talk to anybody and explain to them what enforced least privilege looks like and talk them on that journey. And they get it. And then they can go off to their respective worlds and figure it out. But if I start from an academic of policy enforcement point and try to talk you through kind of the academic definition of a policy enforcement point and how it applies in your world, you can lose a lot of people really quickly. So just go enforce least privilege on your applications. Then you move into that third pillar. And this is really manifests itself from a network inspection, seeing who can talk to what. Um, Doing this on the wire, but also being able to do this via identity and how the security controls layer on one another and why we kind of have those pillars shaped the way that we do. But who can talk to what? Then you go one more level down, which is, I think, probably one of the hardest layers, is data security, ensuring visibility into all data movement, whether it be in memory, whether it be at rest, whether it be over the wire, making sure that you see how data is moving and making sure that it doesn't move outside of a boundary or is accessed by the right individual, things of that nature. And then lastly, and I feel like this is where a lot of frameworks really fall apart, because security typically doesn't operate for a failure state, but it's that operational excellence component. If I did the first four pillars beautifully, then I track deviations. An example being, let's say we have a secure VPN, but you're disconnecting from it. Well, there's probably a reason you're disconnecting from it. Now, we could say that you're not allowed to disconnect from the VPN at all, and from a technical control standpoint, but let's say hotel Wi-Fi spotty and you need to troubleshoot something, or you need to, maybe your job role entitles you to go places that maybe are considered off-roading on the internet a little bit. Looking at those deviations of when the first four pillars fail, or those exceptions of those first four pillars. Let's say I'm working for the federal government and I have to go into a SCIF. Well, I can't bring a USB stick into a SCIF. Clearly, I'm going to need another way to access corporate collateral when I'm inside the SCIF, if permitted. But I can't bring a USB stick. So it's looking at those exceptions and then looking back at operational policy to see, do we need that deviation? Do we need that exception? And refine the technical rules that you have in place when you're securing identities, devices, apps, and you're looking at enforcing least privilege, things of that nature. So that's kind of the framework that we built. And then we took ourselves on that journey. And then obviously we went out and helped customers because they're at varying places on that journey, depending upon what external forces in their environment force them to shift. So if you were popped, for example, you may be very worried about data security almost immediately, but maybe not hit some of those precursor steps around hardening your device or hardening your applications. And so it just helps people understand that it probably should be a linear journey to some degree, but it's security and you can bounce around a lot at times if needed.
Yeah. Now, what was did you have a team of people that you were working with on this? What was the sort of, the implementation or the design team and the implementation team for this incredibly complex multi-layer sort of strategy? Like, did you have people who were taking care of, sort of lower level things for you, or were you the head of the whole show?
I was running the whole program. I was meeting
Okay.
with the chief product officer, Lee Klarich, weekly to provide updates. But Palo Alto Networks being a security company, running security within Palo Alto Networks, it was a very cross-functional endeavor across product teams, PMs, engineering, and InfoSec, and even the marketing teams to kind of understand the security use case, why we were using the product a certain way, or where the product needed to flex, or where the product had absolutely nailed our problem statement, and why we weren't worried in a particular area, we're investing in others. And so it was an interesting initiative across the entire company to take the entire organization on that journey.
Heck yeah. No, that's, again, because so many of our listeners are thinking about what they want to do within cybersecurity. I feel like that was a really good, concise definition of what, doing something as large as that, implementing a zero trust strategy across an entire security company. would be like, and what kind of thought process, because it's, when you're still in the student phase, it's hard to imagine like where would you even start with something like that. And I think that was a great summary. So um, one more thing here with regards to your current job, like what are your responsibilities as head of security and IT for Postman? Like what does that role entail, and what are some of your common tasks and responsibilities?
So it's actually very convenient that IT and security are merged together. Um, Classic IT is concerned about availability. With a CIO hat on, I care less about version 11 and version 10 compatibility issues. I only care about availability. I don't care about the security patch. Well, being responsible for security, I have to care about both. And so it short circuits a lot of the risk that we have here at Postman, because we're able to move very rapidly on walking the entire ecosystem from an enterprise perspective. And so Postman's security posture internally has pretty much changed overnight as a result of just the amount of flexibility that we've got. It also helps that it's 850 people, not 20,000. So there's definitely a scope and scale to it. But I think that's the first component of kind of having those two units merged, because I've seen in other organizations or in past lives, um, or vicariously through friends within my network, there's always that struggle between IT and security of I need to apply a patch now. I only take downtime on Sundays and things along those lines. And that risk trade-off of availability and security are often highly spirited debates. And I get to fight with myself. And so that's kind of convenient. So I think that's with regards to kind of the overall mission. I think from a responsibilities, uh, we own product security. Therefore, how do we make the Postman product as secure as possible? We also drive an initiative of Postman at Postman. So we use Postman prolifically within the IT space in order to scale, but we also look at the Postman tool or platform from a security perspective of what do I need to make Postman secure to protect myself. And so we drive a lot of feature requests back into engineering. All of the engineering heads are my peers, so it's very convenient. I don't have to work with another organization to drive that change. But Postman at Postman is a very powerful thing for us to kind of drive product improvement. And then lastly, just from an IT perspective, continually looking at employee productivity and how we scale in this new AI-based agent world to keep up with the speed with which engineering is moving and the company's moving as well. And so I think that's kind of the broad responsibilities at kind of a 50,000-foot level.
Awesome. Love it. Love hearing about it. So, Sam, the topic you chose to discuss today is the concept of what you called rogue AI agents, and how these AI agents are becoming an integral part of malware development. So before we start, set the table for us. What's happening here? What are these rogue AI agents, and what are they doing that's new in this threat landscape?
So there's a couple rogue AI agents are probably a lot like how people see shadow IT as one definition. And the Sam is the well-intentioned user who's trying to accomplish something, but he's built an agent that would be considered rogue from a governance standpoint, and he's
I see.
hurtling things out out to random APIs in order to kind of accomplish his mission. I'm not talking Skynet where agents build agents or anything along those lines, but
Yeah.
that's kind of the first lens with which we have to look at what I would call a rogue AI agent. It's your well-intentioned developer trying to solve a problem or business user, and how do we get them to do the right thing? That's kind of the first front that we have to look at and worry about. The second front is the industry is continually changing. And so then it turns into, well, MCP is great, or model context protocol is great. But if model context protocol doesn't take in security into consideration, well, then how are we properly governing what gets built? So when Chris runs out to his favorite GitHub repository, rips an MCP server off the internet, and now wires it up into a product, well, that would be very bad. There'd be no governance around that.
I
Right.
separate out that use case because that's a very engineering specific use case versus kind of the first use case, which is more business enablement. And then there's the last one, which is the bad guys are often using AI to come after us. And
Yep.
that's, I think, what a lot of people latch onto because it sounds really sexy. And we clearly see it with regards to how well phishing emails are crafted and things of that nature. So I see kind of three legs to that rogue AI conversation.
Okay. I want to linger a moment on the first of the three there because I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. So, say for instance, your engineer or your security person or even your marketing person, though, is tasked with, okay, you can use this particular AI device, Copilot, whatever, your in-house one, but just stick to that one, stick to these prompts, and you're saying, well, I'm not getting what I need, and so what if I kind of go over here and use this other one that's not part of our approved list, but it got the job done. Is that what you're saying? So you're adding this extra kind of layer of you know, and justifies the means, and then adding that extra sort of potential garbage into the network.
Yeah. And I think that just comes down to who's building what, how are they doing it, how are they validating it, how does security get eyes on it, and not to push Postman, but we've thought a lot about that problem, and we've been in that space for 35 million developers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I'm able to see the collections that you're working in, we've abstracted away the model. We let you pick models, but we've abstracted away a lot of that access and kerfuffle of trying to validate that. We let you compare models for performance. Um, it's a safe place for you to play where we can get full visibility from a security perspective into everything that you're doing and all the APIs that you're calling. Seems like a win-win across the board as opposed to someone curling off to some particular API that we don't necessarily see it, or it's stuck in a firewall log somewhere that you're hoping everyone can kind of tie together. So I think that's one of the constructs of, we can look at this from a rogue AI standpoint, or we could just look at this. This is a classic collaboration problem. How do we pull it
Yeah.
all together and then give you the guardrails to do it safely, where we have collections to structure what does and doesn't get seen. We help you generate documentation. That way it's very up to date. As you change your API, it gets auto updated. How do we scan it for secrets in case you are leaking? We tell you things of that nature.
Okay, so you mentioned that old very, very common acronym these days, APIs. We talked about it a lot on the show, and it's we had someone come on and talk about API hacking and so forth. But obviously, APIs, which act as the portal between e-commerce and the customer, and are exceptionally prone to compromise. We had Katie Paxton Fear on a while to talk about this very thing, and she hacked an API on the episode, and as she put it, it's incredibly hard for security professionals to secure APIs and incredibly easy for hackers to compromise them. So I'm guessing that these aspects of these AI agents and the number of them could make API compromise easier. But is it also the case that like the AI tools could be used in the defense of APIs and being able to find flaws in APIs faster? Is that also the case?
Yeah. So we have a couple of tools built internally where we fuzz our own APIs internally within the Postman ecosystem to make sure what we're building ties back to kind of our best practices. But in general, for just API hygiene, I think there's a lot of opportunity for developers and for those of us who are creating guardrails and forcing best practices to help with solve versioning, error handling. Like, don't give me a stack trace. Don't give me more insight into what your application is doing. Better input validation. Thinking about how to build APIs better. Those are kind of the guardrails underneath the hood that we're trying to continually think about, and how do we help developers kind of do it right with the least amount of friction possible. That way they come out the gate better. And that's what we wake up every day and worry about and talk about, and kind of when I mentioned Postman at Postman, what we're looking to do to the platform.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in our pre-show, you said, "quote AI agent security is not rocket science, and it's in fact defined by typical enterprise security steps." So I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Can you talk a little bit about that particular gap? I mean, obviously, Postman's one way to close the gap, but what is this more of a policy issue? Is this a tech issue? Is it all of the above? Is it something else?
I definitely say it's all of the above. I think if specs, OpenAI specs were created, managed, and we followed those open API specs, and we coded to them, I think the world would be a better place in general. I think if fuzzing tools were more prolific and they were integrated into the normal suite of functional tests that you already do, a common shop will say, okay, I've built it, I run my functional tests, I kick it over to security, and then security lives within Burp Suite. Well,
Hmm.
that's another human talking to another human to then perform an action and then provide feedback. It's like, well, why aren't those API tests automatically integrated into the stack from top to bottom to ensure that you have to pass the entire litany of tests and you don't have to
Yeah.
custom build something in order for that integration to take place? So I think that's where we can continue to raise the bar on hygiene. But it is a policy problem. It's a tooling problem. There's a couple of problems kind of compounded there, which make it harder for developers to do the right thing out of the gate. An analogy of where I would say it's very seamless is if I was to take a really hardened base image. Well, if I could only pull from secure base images in a registry, well, then it's really hard for me to go out to the internet and go grab an Alpine image that may not be as well maintained. I have to grab the one that's blessed. And that's where policy and enforcement can very cleanly be solved. But we don't really have that in the API space as good as we could have it. And I think developers still have to jump through some hoops in order to do that. And what we worry about and what we think about with a lot of the things that we build into the platform, but other people still have to worry about in other ecosystems.
Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of could be on the cusp of sort of API 2.0 in the sense that like we've just sort of whistled past the graveyard for so many years about the fact that these are so easy to compromise and so easy to jump into. And you're saying that, if you have this sort of built-in set of tests, up and down the stack, can you talk about like what, I mean, because it almost sounds like a new sort of way to think about these particular portals. Can you talk about like what that would look like in terms of like data going through an API or things like that with these new tests? How would that change things?
Um, I would look to examples like RBAC testing.
Hmm.
It's tricky to test. You've got two users, one has higher permission, one has lower permission. How do you exercise programmatically user A can't do what user B can? And how do you wire that up so that I, as a user, don't have to think a lot about that, but you could generate those tests programmatically so that we could explore a lot of those scenarios? Developers have to worry about that and struggle with that. And that's probably if you had to go talk to any developer off the street, like that would be one of their headaches, at which point they would try to displace that back into the security team. They'd be like, hey, that's your job, security team. How do we get those roles and those problems to converge? I think is an interesting space that hasn't been played with enough.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I see as kind of 2.0 and where the industry is
Yeah.
going and needs to continue going.
Can you can you sort of suggest the way that a conversion like that would work?
So if I was to see your source code, if I was to then be able to see all of your endpoints, how would I generate your OWASP top 10 checks?
Hmm.
How would how would I in your tooling generate a spec for how your API should behave and then enforce that spec against you to ensure that you're following the right procedures? That's kind of where I see the industry going and
Hmm.
see where we're all trying to put the right guardrails in place to ensure that the right thing gets done. I'll borrow the term shift left as close to the developer as
Sure.
possible, as opposed to what it sounded like in one of your previous podcasts where someone said, let me show you. broken access authentication on the fly here,
Mm-hmm.
and things of that
Yep.
nature.
Yeah. Just adding negative quantities of things and finding ways, and next thing you know, you've got someone else's credit card and so forth. So obviously, cyber work is work is half the name of our podcast, and we want to talk about careers in this space. So for listeners who might be interested in learning about either being the sort of policy person that deals with the sort of rogue AI agent threat, or their influence in malware development, or especially API security and building toolboxes, like what are some current things you'd recommend they learn? Are there particular people reporting or covering on these topics that you follow that you think are especially worth keeping on top of?
Yeah, so I'd say the Hacker News is probably the best place for kind of what's happening at a high level. Um, I would say the CEO of Acquia, Chris, I think is just doing a phenomenal job of kind of being at the forefront and talking about what's going on. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Unit 42 from Palo Alto Networks. I just think that they're doing a fantastic job in the space of documenting how things are being exploited and what they're seeing in the wild. And you'll find a lot of use cases there around how the attackers are using AI to reverse engineer builds and find gaps and then build 0 days based off of what they see. And so I think those are just probably three sources right there of kind of what I would cruise in order to kind of get a pulse. And as you build out your network, or you look to see who they're connected to, you can build out your own ecosystem for tuning your threat landscape.
Nice. So because a lot of these skills that hiring managers want employees to have are still pretty new, there's some challenge in presenting these new skills, that you're learning in sort of keeping it, in these kind of bleeding edge technologies, or maybe you know them, but you don't really have a chance to sort of like use them in your current day-to-day work, or your student who's trying to get their first job. Like, what are some skills, and especially keywords for those skills, that you would want to see on a resume that would show you, say I'm the hiring manager, that a candidate is keeping up with the latest innovations and skills and isn't going to be, a dinosaur in 2 years?
Well, I think there's the keyword bingo component of it, which low end certifications like your Security Plus and things along those lines. I think that's just good. It proves that you have some level of fundamentals and you're willing to endure some level of pain. But the world has changed so much from when I was coming up. Hack the Box is fantastic.
Oh,
And being able to showcase some of the work that you've done in Hack the Box and talk about it in a meaningful way, where you weren't potentially doing things that were illegal, like that's a fantastic work experience that you can pivot a lot of questions into that you can write about in your resume, but you can pivot that interview question. I think that's just huge. So I think that's probably a second dimension that I would look at. Third dimension, there's always, and I do this for candidates, usually early to mid tier, is I'll look at your GitHub links. What code are you forking? What are you working on? What are you tinkering? Have you made any pull requests? Like, what are you trying to do in the space? And it doesn't even have to be recent, but it just shows me that passion for security and for engineering that really sets a lot of candidates apart. And I've probably hired in my career, probably no less than probably 50, 60 interns. And almost always, those are the ones that help show me passion. And those are the ones who usually do the strongest in interviews. Is they have kind of what I would call those extracurriculars, if you will, and not just a phenomenal GPA or a computer science student or read a book and want to talk about the book.
Understand it sort of academically, I read this book over and over and over, but you've never actually like touched, the tools, or actually, even if you're not doing it perfectly. I know we've heard plenty of hiring managers say that they just want to see that you're thinking about it, and that you're trying to break things and put them back together. You don't necessarily have to have the solution. You just need to be knowing that there's a problem to look for. So because skill learning happens steadily, and it can be hard to kind of boil the ocean sometimes. Let me ask you this: once our listeners are done with this episode, they turn the YouTube off. Obviously, want them to go look at Postman website. But what is one skill, no matter how small, that they should try to learn today? It could be as small as proficiency in a single type of AI prompt or a productivity hack or whatever you like. What's a small thing that you think everyone should sort of like master as soon as possible?
Um, Basic scripting. Uh, I
Okay.
I don't want to shove you into APIs, but just be dangerous concept. Uh, do a little vibe coding to get some code out. Understand what it does, augment it, and just hurling some packets across the wire to get a, a thing done and then get a response back. I think it's just such a powerful concept. And whether that's playing with MCP, whether that's firing off a RESTful service, whether that's just writing something to the disk, manipulating some data, just wherever you are on your technical journey, I think can pull you into cybersecurity because you're dealing with IO, you're dealing with memory, you could be dealing with network. There's just a lot of controls that could take place as you try to protect your data. And there is no real wrong way to start in my mind, but the world will require more and more scripting for people to be successful cybersecurity professionals. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't vibe code, but you need to understand the code that it's generating and be able to manipulate it. And I don't see Skynet coming anytime soon. So get comfortable with code and using that as an extension of you to go perform actions.
Can you talk about that? We Skynet's obviously been yeah, name checked on this podcast a number of times. Sort of speak to that, because I know it's said in jest and so forth, but boy, you sure get a spectrum of opinion across the internet. Surprise, surprise, that well, it's only a matter of time, or it's this, or it's that, or oh, sure, these things look stupid now, but they're going to be real smart in about 50 years and what have you. Like, can you, what are your thoughts on the future of this particular type of thinking and interconnectedness and thinking in quotes and whatnot?
Well, I would, every technology revolution we've ever had, people have said that the world will never be the same and some class of work will go away and we won't need humans to do the thing anymore. The technology
Right.
will take over, and whether it was the locomotive or electricity, like, just the work shifted. And we're going to see the same thing with AI. I still need skilled engineers, but the bar to create is getting lower. Your product managers are now able to build a prototype to hand back into engineering to go see um, how it really functions and get better visibility into that. So as the floor lowers, I see more the democratization of development, but I just see the work shifting. Software engineers will need to solve harder and harder complex problems. It won't be that I need a software engineer anymore. The code will write the code, and I just have to tell it, like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cute. I grabbed Lovable just like everybody else, and I spun up a DocuSign clone within like 30 prompts, but it's not a real DocuSign solution. But it has the
Hmm.
spirit and look like one, but it isn't hundreds of thousands of hours building a SaaS platform that I think I could prompt my way out of. But I got close. And so I think it's going to democratize that skill set so a lot of other people are able to contribute and help software engineers focus on the more intractable problems that they can't solve as easily today because there's a lot of cruft that they need to work through. And that's when I joke about Skynet, the machine building the machine and taking it all over. Um, I don't think that's the case. I just think that the world, the things that we're going to be doing in the future are just going to be different.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any, did you ever get like a piece of career advice that was especially influential to you, whether it was from a parent or a past boss or anything like that? Do you have anything you can pass on?
I'll keep it anonymous. When I was at Nvidia, and I think I went through like 6 CIOs when I was at Nvidia, so they shall remain nameless. But they said the faster you give away your job, the faster you will go up in a diligent way. There's like
Yes, right.
a little asterisk at the end of it, in a diligent way. And what
Hmm.
I took that to heart really early on in my career. And how could I build something amazing, package it up, evangelize it, teach others, do the change management, and then hand it off so that I could create space for myself to go tackle the next challenge. And if you go look at my LinkedIn, I believe that one piece of advice helped propel me through my entire career, just with that continuum mindset of how do I do something amazing with a bunch of people around me, package it up, move it on so that we can go do something amazing together. And I've always tried to embody that as much as I humanly can. So that would be my one piece of advice that I got that has really resonated with me. And that asterisk at the end is always the most important thing, in a diligent and responsible way.
Yeah, definitely don't shovel it onto someone else's plate until when they're not ready. So as we wrap up today, you've talked a little bit about Postman, but tell our listeners about a little bit more about your company.
Sure. I think the API collaboration space is at a real inflection point due to AI. And you will hear many thought leaders talk about how AI now has arms and legs. Those arms and legs to go perform activities into the world, they're via APIs. And Postman really is in the hands of 35 million developers and 90+% of the S&P 500. Everyone's already using it to collaborate and be their arms and legs into the ecosystem. And as that AI wave continues to walk through our entire ecosystem and change what we do, I just see Postman as just a beautiful opportunity for everyone to get in, start experimenting with affecting change into their world for their workflows, and make the world a better place.
Fabulous. All right. Well, that sounds like someplace people would want to go. So if you could tell our listeners where to find more about Postman and Sam Chehab while they're at it, and any other events or things you like to promote about yourself, let her rip.
Sure. Yeah. So just go to Postman. If you're not one of those 35 million developers, hopefully you go to postman.com and you sign up for a free account and just start experimenting and continue on your journey. As far as just plugs in general, there is a event in June. It's called PostCon. It's down in Los Angeles. It's June 3rd and June 4th. We're talking about everything that is API. So come on down. We'll be talking about how AI intersects with it. There'll be a lot of vendors there. There'll be a lot of hands-on workshops. This isn't just kind of the classic, here's a talk at the 50,000 foot level, but there'll be SMEs talking about how they solve problems. Yours truly will be there as well, talking about security at Postman and how we're using our tools and our SDOC and things of that nature. And I'd love to come rap with you. So come on down to PostCon.
PostCon in June. June 3rd, did you say?
Yeah, June 3rd and June 4th. And if you
All
just
right.
find your favorite search engine or go to Perplexity if you're not using search engines anymore, and just type in PostCon 25 and hopefully I'll see you there.
It'll all be there. All right. Well, Sam Chehab, thank you for talking me through this new aspects of API security and the new landscape. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. And thank you to everyone who watches, listens, and writes into this podcast with feedback. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover or guests that you'd like to see on the show, drop them in the comments as always. And before we go, don't forget that infosecinstitute.com/free contains a whole bunch of free and exclusive stuff for CyberWork listeners. It's here that you can find your free cybersecurity talent development playbook. You'll find our in-depth training plans and strategies for the 12 most common security roles, including SOC analyst, penetration tester, cloud security engineer, information risk analyst, privacy manager, secure coder, ICS professional, and more. If you want to know more about what a career in cybersecurity pays, you can also find our free cybersecurity salary guide for the latest data on popular certifications and their related roles. There's also security awareness posters, ebooks, and you can sign up for 100+ free courses on our Infosec skills platform. You can learn incident response, forensics, security architecture, and more. That's all at infosecinstitute.com/free. And yes, there will be a link in the description below. One last time, thank you to Sam Chehab and Postman, and thank you for watching and listening. This is Chris Senko signing off. Until next time, keep learning, keep moving forward, keep one step ahead of the story, and don't forget to have a little fun along the way.